Go for it.
Okay. Welcome everyone for our 5th episode of season 2 of Everyone's Welcome, a fresh conversation about disability. We are so excited to sit down with Reverend Bill Gaventa today. But before we do that, we have some information about this webinar. Everyone is muted, but if you have a question or comment, please type it into the chat box anytime during our conversation. Bill will remain with us beyond the 30 minutes we've set aside to answer those questions. Please stay on with us as you're able. We are recording Everyone's Welcome, and you'll receive an email with the link to the recording when it's available. You can find all of our past episodes at jkidaccess.org/everyone's welcome. Everyone's Welcome is a partnership between my organization, Jewish Learning Venture in Philadelphia, and Shelley's organization, Inclusion Innovations, based in Minneapolis. We're both moms of sons with disabilities who have navigated systems and attitudes. We have both led community inclusion initiatives in our respective Jewish communities, as well as contributing to the Interfaith Network. We are committed to the values and practices of belonging in aspects of all faith community life. And we're also both published authors. We started Everyone's Welcome in May of 2020 when we realized that all the conferences and gatherings that so many of us had hoped to attend were all canceled due to the coronavirus. Everyone's Welcome is our response to the changing landscape, and we're honored to have our guests and audiences join us for a chance to connect, to share, and to be in this community. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Gabby. It's so great to see so many of you here today, and I just want to echo Gabby's thanks for being here with us. Today is really exciting for me to welcome Bill Gaventa. Bill is a great friend. He's a mentor to many people who work at the intersection of spirituality, faith, and disability. I met Bill over 18 years ago. I don't know if you remember this, Bill. Bill spoke at our first Faces of Inclusion Interfaith Conference held in Minneapolis. And since then, Bill has supported and encouraged me in my work, and I've learned, Bill, so much from him. I always gush when I see Bill. It's kind of a thing, but it's heartfelt.
There are treatments for that. Yep.
Yeah, I know. I don't want it. But Bill has inspired and taught countless of his fans around the globe. Bill has innovated the field of disability altogether, as his influence and work have led to important mind shifts about spirituality and faith community participation in person-centered planning and faith community inclusion. Here's just a snapshot of some, but not all of the many initiatives that Bill has given his energy and his heart to.
Remember, we just have 30
Bill,
minutes.
I know, we're getting there. Bill's the founder of the Summer Institute on Theology and Disability, and he's now the director emeritus. He was the coordinator of the Collaborative on Faith and Disability, linking a number of university centers of excellence in developmental disabilities who are addressing spirituality through initiatives in training, technical assistance, research, and dissemination. He is the former director of community and congregational supports at the Elizabeth M. Boggs Center on Developmental Disabilities in New Jersey. And Bill's primary areas of experience and expertise are spiritual and faith-based supports with people with disabilities, training for clergy, seminarians, and community services staff, aging and end-of-life grief issues in intellectual and developmental disabilities, cultural competence, and community building. And Bill served as the president of the American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. As a writer and editor, he has edited newsletters and several books. He's written articles and chapters and has served as the editor of the Journal of Disability, Religion, and Health for 14 years. His new book, Spirituality and Disability, Recovering Wholeness, was published by Baylor University Press in 2018. And Bill and his wife, Beverly, live in Austin, Texas, where their son, Matthew, daughter-in-law, Sarah, and most important, their grandson Charlie also live. I'd like to give you a big everyone's welcome. Welcome, Bill. Thanks for sitting down with us today.
Thank you. An honor.
Bill, we're going to jump right in. I want to ask you, you are a leader in what's known as the intersection between religion, spirituality, and disability. What life experiences and beliefs called you to this work?
Well, it's one of those things where you know what happened at the moment, and then as years go on, you look back and you say, oh, there were some other things that led to my interest in that. The specific sort of calling around it was I was a seminary student at Union Theological Seminary in New York, did some clinical pastoral education and chaplaincy during my last year, and then we went down to Durham where my wife was in a PhD program, and I did another full year of clinical pastoral education. And as part of that year, got assigned by my supervisor for 1/10 of my time to the Division for Disorders of Development and Learning, which when he said he was going to do that, I said, well, what's that? And he said, well, it's working with families who have mentally retarded children using the lingo of the time, and they come for a 2 or 3 day multidisciplinary evaluation. And we had a chaplaincy student there last year, and we'd like to continue it. And I said, classically, well, I can't do that. Send somebody else. And they said, no, we think you're the one. And it was out of that experience of, and there was no such thing as spiritual assessments in those days, or it was a very tight medical model, interdisciplinary team. And out of mostly sitting with families while they were watching behind one-way mirrors, different kinds of tests and evaluations going on, and trying to talk with them about their journey and their experience, and trying to figure out some things to ask about their faith background and whether their faith community had been supportive, and mostly hearing horror stories, that's where the call began. And it was kind of we got to do something about this. And that led to my figuring out some ways to stay on there for the next 1.5 to 2 years while my wife was still in a program. And then we went to Rochester, New York for our first real job. She was at Colgate Rochester Divinity School. And I got up there and found out that there was a Protestant chaplain's job open at Newark Developmental Center, which was one of the old hellhole institutions in upstate New York, and Newark, right about 30 miles outside of Rochester. And I got that job, and there's the journey since then. I would sometimes call it the journey of a deinstitutionalized chaplain. And what I know now also is that there's people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who begged the question of where is my community, which in some ways had been one of my life questions as well, because I had grown up overseas as a missionary kid, came back to this country in high school, and was still trying to figure out kind of who I was and where I belonged. It's pretty clear to me now over the years that as I have helped kind of work that out with people who obviously had a much more tragic sense of no community at all, that the part of their gift to me has been helping me to find my own and develop that as well. So that's where it started.
Bill, what are some of the major shifts that you've seen in how spirituality and religion play a part in the lives of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities? And second part of that question, how does this impact participation in one's faith community?
Well, major shifts. I mean, 2020 compared to 2000, even the 2000 year when we had the 2000 Accessible Congregations campaign that was led by Jenny Thornburg, or go back to 1990, there's so much more going on. in faith communities of all different stripes, which is really, really exciting. Back in the 80s, the kind of progression occurred to me that what we're talking about, as I moved from a chaplain of an institution to a chaplain of another smaller institution and coordinator of religious services, and worked with faith communities on helping people move into community and congregations, was that we're talking about this progression of people doing nothing to then doing all kinds of special ministries and special ministry programs, then to doing nothing special, just including people and being with people was a huge gift, and then recognizing later on that I may be doing something for those folks in that inclusion journey, but they are also giving to me, or giving and bringing gifts to this congregation. So that movement of prepositions, of from away to for or to with, and then recognizing by. I think in what we see now is a whole lot more of the with and by going on in faith communities. And you see big programs that started up as special ministry programs of one kind or another, asking that question now too. Okay, we know we're doing this well, but how can we help the people that we are connected to and serving get connected to other parts of faith communities and the congregation, so that they have relationships and roles outside of our particular program. And I think the greatest shift right now in congregations is, and the most important one, I think, is helping people not just get through the different kinds of confirmations and bar mitzvahs and all those rituals of belonging, but then the real question of, all right, you're called to serve as well. Where do you want to serve? Where do you want to be an active, participating, contributing member of this people of God, however they're defined? And so finding people jobs in congregations where then other people can see them acting out, living out their faith as well, seems, I think, is the growing edge. And the edge that I think will really transform a lot of people from seeing people as poor disabled folks who need to be received all the time, to people who are actually have a desire out of a strong faith to give.
Thank you, Bill. We're wondering, what are some of the obstacles that service providers encounter in empowering staff to support an individual's spiritual or religious preferences? What are some of the considerations for service provider agencies to walk alongside someone with a disability?
Oh, if I could count the ways and those barriers, because that's where I spent a lot of my time, especially in New Jersey, working with service providers working out of the Boggs Center and doing training around all kinds of things, but also around the spirituality. For one, it's not, spirituality is very rarely addressed as an active part of program planning, and really honest, asking questions beyond, well, what faith do you consider yourself, or if that, but what would you like? What's your dream there? And even in person-centered planning, it takes people who are sensitive, I think, to the importance of spirituality and the potential of it to help people build community, to ask those kinds of questions. So one, getting it into that kind of cycle of looking at people's dreams and goals and working along with that. And a lot of people who do that level of assessing and planning haven't had much training in that as well. In fact, many professionals in other disciplines, I think, ended up getting their professional credentials in disciplines that in many ways taught them to be pretty leery of faith and religion. That they're supposedly more based on scientific human services kinds of disciplines. And people who then have certainly heard the horror stories about people being hurt by faith. So I think there were a couple of reasons that people said, and we don't know what to deal with this. When you think about church folks looking at the system and saying, oh my God, look at all the languages and all those, all the acronyms and all those agencies and stuff. Well, think about it the other way around. when you get people in the system looking at it, faith communities, and saying, oh, which one? You know, and you know, they're just a huge difference. And then I think the other key thing is that it too often gets put upon the backs or responsibilities of direct care staff to be the ones helping to take people to congregations or being part of programs, and without a lot of training or sensitivity either in that, and or helping them understand with the potential real importance of this, that it's not just taking somebody to synagogue or taking somebody to church, but helping people to be. Most direct care staff don't have the time, nor have they had the training, and in many times not the background, especially if they, like in New Jersey, are from many different immigrant countries, and essentially are doing the same thing I was doing as a kid, trying to figure out where they belong in this country as well. So you're asking them to help people be parts of communities that are strange to them, you know, and where the rules are not understood, and where they're worried about how people are seeing them as an immigrant, as much as then with the stigma around disability. So anytime, I think, when faith communities are working with service providers and direct care staff in particular, you've really got to think of ministering to that duo that are being welcoming to both, so that the staff feel just as welcomed and just as listened to as the person with an intellectual and developmental disability and their families. So, and then right now, as you know, of course, COVID's made that even worse, but there's been this Gordian knot that a few people have figured out how to kind of cut, which is if an agency whose mission statement says we believe in natural and community supports and community participation, and then you have a congregation come and say, oh, we know some of the people who are living in your group home. We have some people from our church who'd be willing to pick them up on Sunday. Can we do that? And the answer is no, because they either have to go through the whole volunteer process, which is sometimes more difficult than becoming a staff member in terms of background checks and other kinds of things, or just it gets so complicated in so many ways that we've got to figure one of the cutting edges I think is helping to build trust between congregations and agencies, so that there's a different kind of risk and trust assessment. So if somebody's coming from a congregation, they're essentially, the congregation is saying they're coming on behalf of this congregation. We fully trust them, and come with them a number of times if you need to. But otherwise, it just gets so short-staffed on the weekends, and people just barely have enough people to get people ready for the day many times. And so those are all kinds of things we've got to pay attention to.
It's important that this is all on the radar, both of congregations and service organizations, as well as families and certainly individuals with IDD who want to participate. So
yeah, I mean, just like we'd want to find out where people are coming from who are new to our congregations, then let's find out where people are, where they live, and what the culture in which they're living. If we want to, folks who are being supported by agencies, either in group homes or independent living or whatever, let's find out those systems and the communities in which they're living and find out more about that. And that comes from being present. And a lot of congregations don't know that a person with an intellectual disability could ask a member of their congregation to come and be at their annual planning team or be part of personal plan. They have that right to do that. And, that way you get to build that shared voice about we are all kind of a community around, not two separate silos.
exactly. Well, we're gonna get to the heart of December right now, and due to COVID, of course, Thanksgiving was so different and in many ways difficult for us. But now that December's here, and many of our traditional gatherings will not be happening. in the manner that they have for a lifetime. How can faith community, families, friends, and service providers support individuals with disabilities to celebrate their holidays?
So my first question would be back to the rest of you, in a sense. What do you think is at the heart of people's desire to participate in your congregations or faith-based programs? What do you think is at the heart of that? And what do they appreciate most out of that? And some people might say, well, it's being the ritual or the Christmas Eve service or, the Hanukkah celebrations at the parties at the synagogue. And yeah, that's true. We're going to miss those rituals. But in that sense, people with disabilities are like everybody else this year. And the irony is, of course, is congregations, churches, and synagogues have figured out a way to put their events online and do some creative things. They are, in fact, more accessible to people with disabilities than they have been in the past, and people who have difficulty coming. But at the heart of all that, I think, is the gift of relationship and acceptance and welcome and saying you're an important part of us, and we value you. And you think then about holiday celebration. So what can congregations then do during the holidays in particular to make sure that people have an extra dose of relationship and contact during this time? So for instance, with Hanukkah, which used to be one of my favorite celebrations when I was a chaplain at the Developmental Center in Rochester, because you did the same thing every day for 8 days. It was physical, you could see something happening, you could do the lights. It was a ritual that didn't need a whole lot of intellectual understanding, and you felt like you were part of that community. Well, it would not be hard, would it not be, for people from a synagogue to call up somebody or Zoom or do FaceTime and say, let's light our Hanukkah candles together, or light our candles together. And I remember the year when, because of some people who lived at the center where we were, and they wouldn't allow candles in their rooms, the year when electric candles came out, and that was the huge gift, and no telling where they are now. But doing those kinds of rituals together, opening an Advent calendar, doing calls and doing that, or you could do a Zoom thing, sure, but a lot of people I would bet don't have the Zoom capacity at places where they live, but they have cell phones, or people have cell phones, or staff have cell phones. And if you could figure out a sort of like Christians would say, an Advent calendar of things for people from the congregation to do over a course of a number of days, it could be simple as whatever. Tomorrow we're going to drop off a poinsettia on your porch, just one thing after another. Then you're going to keep that sense of relationship and connection. And even better if it's more than one person doing that with one person. So you help somebody remember that it's a group of people, that those people are my friends and they're in touch with me. A lot of the so-called typical normal people don't have that kind of thing happening during the holidays. That's what I would say.
That's great, Bill. Thank you. I'm wondering, and this is our 5th question, and then we'll get to others' questions or comments. I'm wondering, what have been some of the surprises and the lessons learned when people with IDD are supported to participate in the faith community in which they want to belong?
Well, I think some people probably have thought it wouldn't make any difference to those people with intellectual disabilities, because what could they understand anyway? And then being profoundly moved by a transformation that they feel and see, and growth that continues to happen. As people learn how to learn the hidden curriculum of our congregations, and learn how to participate in the rituals Sorry, I don't have a glass of water. I came straight from grand jury to this. Right. Thanks, Shelley. And but so that kind of thing. But I think what you find is, I think people then find ways that things are contributing to the congregation and faith communities in so many other ways. I think people will say, lots of faith communities will say, it's not just one, it can very easily increase the number of people coming or being part of things, because you involve a person with a disability, you're also impacting, like a stone thrown in the middle of a pond, their family and their staff and other people who care about them. Just like a bad story radiates outward, so does a good story, in what we Christian folks would call evangelical witness then at that point. But it's that kind of, or you could call good PR or whatever you want to. That kind of thing happens, and then they will say, and so numbers of people getting involved, but it's the quality of things that happen that get different, especially when people get to the point of having people participate in the service in different kinds of leadership roles, or having people. I think some of the great joys sometimes come from the things that people are afraid of happening, like the rhetorical comment to a clergyman who's just asked a rhetorical question in a sermon, and somebody answers it, and everybody thinks, oh God, I wish I had said that too, or I wish I had felt free to say that, or it's funny, or it's it's straight from the heart or whatever. And those become teaching moments for the whole congregation. It's a number of stories about that. I mean, there was a group of people, I think, from a nursing home who came to one congregation here, and they were kind of scattered near the front. A number of them in these kind of specially built wheelchairs, and they had staff with them. And then they would, there was a service when a number of them were maybe not very comfortable physically or beginning to make some noises and some things like that. And the pastor had enough sense from the pulpit to say, what you hear are the sounds of community, or one of my favorite stories that was in our autism and faith booklet was of the mom who had the kid with autism who got asked to leave the service when the visiting pastor was there one Sunday because the son was acting out a bit. And she decided she'd come back, and she was really afraid. And just when the regular pastor was there, I think maybe she had heard about it, but his son began to get a little antsy again, and they started to get up to leave. And the pastor said from the pulpit, sit down. It's our job to figure this out. It's our job to figure this out. So, and then when people see people doing things with such joy about doing that, or I know congregations both large and small who have said, and some very sophisticated and very large congregations who've said, this is the best thing we do, because I think it reminds them that they are doing something themselves as a community to invite those on the margins and participate and do that. So it's and you can't talk to folks and families without also having developing a ton of questions and stories that make good sermon illustrations. And other times when people, what's really important, I think, is for people who are doing the kind of volunteering and helping and assisting is having times for them to reflect together on what they're learning and what that experience teaches them about their faith, and what their faith brings to that. And then be able to let that kind of learning gradually spread out. It's like one of these very sophisticated congregations has this very wonderful respite care program, and some other programs, and they said, well, we're going to try to start getting people out to participate more with other people. And one of the volunteers said, well, they love this program so much and it means so much to me. And the director had the good sense to say, well, if it means so much to you, think it might be able to mean a lot to some other people in this congregation as well. So it's those kinds of confidence that it may not be immediate, but that that people will over time will begin to really appreciate and see something new about who they are as a congregation and as a tradition.
Wow, it was a lot to digest. There's also comments on the chat. We can get to those in just a minute. And I want to encourage people this is your chance to ask questions of Bill, comments on what you've heard today, and just even as you're thinking about it. So
well, I haven't been looking at the chat comments because I've been talking too much, so
I know we'll get there in a sec, but I want to thank you, Bill, for again educating us, inspiring us, motivating us to do better. And thank you for staying on for a little extra time
no problem.
With those questions.
Much better than grand jury.
Isn't it? We aim to please here at Everyone's Welcome. We want to take the judgment out. So I want to also invite everyone to join us for our next Everyone's Welcome on December 21st, when we welcome author Amy Lutz. Amy writes openly in her new book, it's called We Walk, Life with Severe Autism, about her experiences, the positive and negative, as a mother of her severely autistic son, Jonah. Amy's huge page of her book, and from her, about the challenges commonly held that define autism either as a disease or and talk about questions that inspired her. I see my internet is unstable. Are we good? Gabby, good? Okay, thank you. So some of those questions, what responsibilities do we as citizens and human beings have to one another? What's the place socially and developmentally disabled people in society? And what is the meaning of religion to someone who has no abstract language? So we'll explore these with Amy on December 21st. And We Walk is one of the selections for the 2021 Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month reading program. So that'll also be really a good chance to get to meet Amy. And I'm just going to share my screen. Yay. And now my Google screen. Here we go. Okay. There we are. Maybe. Okay. So maybe we won't share our screen. You can contact Gabby and I at our emails, which are right here on the screen. And we also archive all of our episodes at jkidaccess.org. And we've had some just great presenters. All of our guests have had so much to share, and I hope you'll visit that. And then we also, we want you to check out our books at your favorite online bookseller, Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. And if you would like a signed copy, contact us directly. I've put the email addresses up here, and you can contact Bill directly to purchase a signed copy of his book, Disability and Spirituality, Recovering Wholeness, or you can go right to any of your online retailers. So I'm going to close this, and we are ready for questions and comments.
Shelley, I saw an important question. What is, or where is, from Nancy, where's the best place to start in terms of raising awareness of the benefits of inclusion, with the clergy or with the congregation? Bill, what do you think?
Uh, I would lot, maybe Nancy could say more about what's behind that, because if you've already started doing something, if you're trying to persuade them, then I think getting them to listen to the voices of people with disabilities and their families is probably the place to start, about their desire, dream, wish to be, and what the difference that would make. I've never been a person who believes that putting a guilt trip on a faith community is a way to start. We can do that, but clergy get guilt trips put on them by everybody about not doing enough in different one way or the other. So what you, I think, want to do is say something about the promise, or get them to talk to some congregations or clergy where they're doing this, and hear from somebody they know about what's happened in their own faith community about that, and what the difference is made. So and then if people are leery, then you have all these resources, resources, online video resources, written resources, the Summer Institute video resources. You can, if people need theological rationales, boy, there are all kinds of good Jewish ones and Christian ones and others. So, and also to just act as if this is a big deal. Lots of folks are doing this. Mm-hmm. It's what I call sometimes the importance of a little bit of a friendly competition. Well, if Beth Israel can do that, how come Temple David can't do it? And see what a difference it's made. Or First Methodist down the street's doing it, we ought to be able to do something at Second Baptist. So I think I in the book I talk about, I wrote this a long time ago about kind of the coaching roles. I call it you people, you're then in a coaching role. You're not necessarily, you're coaching somebody to learn how to play the game. And what a coach does is consult with people, not try to teach them a lesson, build collaboration, I think provide some inspirational things, kind of symbolic, perhaps things about, and the other thing, and then helping people with the actual steps. But the other thing is working with, every congregation has an understanding of who they are. Perhaps they have a mission statement. Then the question becomes, we're not asking you to change as a congregation. We're asking you to live out this. By doing this, you're going to live out even better the mission statement that you already have. And a lot of those mission statements will say things like, everybody is welcome, or we want to work with the whole family of God, or whatever. So learn to read those with and to use the biblical word, exegete them from a disability perspective, and then say, by doing this, we are really deepening and broadening our practicing what we preach.
Thanks.
Bill, one of the things that you taught me is that no one is a single story. And I talk about that a lot, because when we look at somebody, we see just the one facet of who we perceive them to be. And this whole notion of belonging and participating means that deep dives are important to understand what's important to another person. So I just wanted to mention that.
Well, I didn't teach you that. I got it from somebody else, and I shared it with you. If you haven't seen,
the best teachers share
it,
right?
Well, as Stan Hauerwas, the best. What happens is that creativity, people think you're creative because you've forgotten where you got something from, and it can become. But that's a famous TED talk by Nigerian novelist Chimamanda Adichie called "The Danger of a Single Story." And it's nothing about disability in that. It's one of those, but it's all about disability if you look at it. And so, it would be a great thing for adult education classes to say, take a look at this, and then help people look at how we often know each other only by one or two stories or parts of who they are, and then be able to help see we may have the label of some kind of disability on this person, but beyond that, they are what? A fisherman, an opera lover, a race car, basketball team, whatever. And the community building strategy for me, and it's in the book, but you can get it from it other places where I've got it out there. It took me years to learn this, is that the best way to connect to people where there's been a distance is to go through a shared thing, a shared interest or shared concern. Some of you may have heard Eric Carter's famous story about a group home asking the congregation to maybe get involved with some of the guys who just moved into this group home. And so they set up a meeting after a congregation Sunday one time and said, we'd like men to come to a meeting to talk about helping to reach out to this group home for guys not far away. How many people came? Zero. This was near Green Bay or Milwaukee or somewhere. And so they thought about that for a while, and then came back a few weeks later and said, how many guys here would like to get together with other men from the congregation on Sunday afternoons and watch the Green Bay Packers games? And 45 people showed up. And then they said, well, as part of this, we know 4 or 5 guys who live in this group home who are all Green Bay Packers fans. And they never get to be with other Green Bay Packer fans, much less go to the bar and drink and watch the game or whatever. And all of a sudden, then the real tragedy here is not that they're disabled, but they can't be with other Green Bay Packer fans. And then those Green Bay Packer fans can say, oh, and you're the coach, you say, I don't know Green Bay Packers. You guys can teach them about Green Bay Packers, and we'll teach you about the disability stuff, but we want you because of a gift and a capacity you already have. And just repeat that in other ways as ways of connecting people around.
Bill, you have been so generous with your time and with what you've shared with us. And we just want to quickly not overlook another question that came up in the chat from Toby, which was for families who have been, neglected for a long time before inclusion was happening and they've felt ignored. How do you then reach out to those families who've already had that experience?
By the way, the issue of time, I see we've got 10, 15 minutes. So I knew it was going to be an hour, and that's fine. I'm a Baptist minister. I'm just getting started. But I think the one, you got to recognize that there's been a lot of hurt and pain there, and maybe they've just given up or turned away. The second thing may be then to ask, I wonder what has taken their place. And for many families, it may have been an advocacy organization or a parent organization where they felt accepted and could talk and to share with other people and work on things. But I think if you're trying to ask them to be brave enough to try again, the first thing that's got to happen is you've got to be prepared to hear the pain and to hear the story. I mean, that's a traumatic history. And what do we know about trauma? You got to tell the story over and over again till it loses some of till it's been received and heard and loses some of its painful edge. And then you also then have to see possibilities and maybe talk with other families who are being part of a successful program, because they may not trust you. You Gabby, or you Shelley, even though you are a parent, they'll say they may not trust you, but they would certainly listen, perhaps listen to some other families who could talk, or just come for a visit someday. Don't come to the program sometime, but come visit and let's walk through and we'll tell you what we do if you want to. And not only hear the pain, but you may not have been the ones that caused it, but there's such a thing as restitute, apologizing on the sake of our background or our particular faith community. We were really sorry this happened, and we've learned a lot and grown up, and people still may not come, but it's an invite is better than a yes, so to speak. A friend of ours used to say it's better to give out an invite to somebody even if they choose not to say no, but an invite's better than not asking.
Thank you, Bill. So we're just grateful that you sat down for this conversation today. And we also want to give a big thanks to each of you who joined us, took some time out of your afternoon. We have a favor to ask of all of you, and that's simple. Please share Everyone's Welcome program emails with your friends and colleagues to help us spread the word. We look forward to seeing you on December 21st, as Shelley said, with author Amy Lutz. Hanukkah, the Jewish festival of light, starts this Thursday evening with the lighting of the first candle. So we're wishing a happy Hanukkah from all of us at Everyone's Welcome to everyone who celebrates. Stay safe, be well, and please take care of yourself. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you
Look
so
forward
much.
to being in touch with some folks. Yep.
You bet.